Hello and welcome back to the Down the Forest Path Knitting Podcast. So I am obsessed with Halloween, completely obsessed. To probably what is actually kind of a weird degree for someone living in a country where you do not celebrate Halloween at all. Because I live in Germany and we have lots of other holidays around this time of the year that are also, some of them like a little bit spooky, a little bit lanterny, a little bit trick-or-treaty, but we do not celebrate Halloween. Unless you live in a really big city, then some kids will come going around, but it's only been a thing for like the last 5-6 years. Anyway, where am I going with this? Well, basically, as soon as we get to the 1st of October, but much to the regret of my husband, sometimes as early as the end of August, it's like the spirit of Halloween compels me to grab all things spooky, read spooky books, and just immerse myself in that Halloween spirit. And this year, the spirit commanded me to knit a few colorwork hats to wear, and I finished them just in time for Halloween. Let me just grab the first one and put it on so you get a bit of an idea. And I actually designed these myself, if you take design in like the widest sense of the word, because I did take colorwork charts from other free patterns on Ravelry and I put them together and made these hats and headbands from those. So today I thought I would actually show you how you can design your own hats based on charts from different free patterns on Ravelry, and how I do it, how I keep track of my patterns, and how I decide what to put where with these things. This is not exactly a full like tutorial, so you should probably have knit 1 or 2 hats before, but it should give you a good idea and a good starting point to be more creative with what you're making, and I hope you enjoy that. So without further ado, let's keep it short and snappy and get right into it. So where do I get my charts from? The first answer for that is probably quite clear: Ravelry. If you look on Ravelry, you will find hundreds and hundreds of free patterns that include colorwork, and you can just take charts out of them and put them in something else, basically. It's really quite simple most of the time. And so I always try to look for some colorwork motifs that fit in 24, and then I paint them on these little note cards that I still have from when I was a student, which should probably tell you something about that. I should really like tidy up my room, but I won't, because sometimes things come in handy, like here for example. So I have these note cards and they have little colorwork motifs on them that I discovered while going through Ravelry. And if they're not just like, I mean, this is so basic, this is basically in every second colorwork sweater there's this, so for this I do not have credit on it, but usually if I find a free motif somewhere, I also write down where I got it from so I can give credit when I use it in something. So for example, this little ghost here is from the Halloween Fair Isle scarf by Susie Stitches, and any of the colorwork patterns I've used you will also find linked in the description below, and they're all free, so just knock yourself out. Or I have this like pumpkin, and it's slightly adapted, but the original pumpkin is from the pumpkin patch beanie from You've Been Yarned, which is also on Ravelry. And so what I do when I find like colorwork motif that I find cute, and I mean this is Halloween related, but you can do this for every single occasion, is I just transfer it to a little study note card. I write on the bottom of it how many stitches it is, white, so I can fit it in a beanie circumference, and then I just put it with my other little note cards, and I am ready to just plug this into a hat or mittens or a cowl or a scarf or a headband or whatever I really want, whenever I really want to. So that is the basic of it. Let's go into the maths a tiny bit more and make it a bit easier to understand. Let's talk about maths. And I know you do not want to hear that, but it's going to be short simple, and explained to you by someone who was notoriously not graded well in mathematics in school. So if I get it, then you will definitely get it too. So essentially, think about your hat as a blank canvas. It has a certain number of stitches that it's wide, and it has a certain number of stitches that it's tall. And this surface of the hat you can just fill with whatever your heart desires, essentially. But if we look at colorwork motifs, then they consist of a certain number of stitches. They have a certain width. So for example, this pumpkin has a width of 10, or this ghost has a width of 6. Now, looking at lots of colorwork motifs, I found that a good number to cast on for a hat is a multiple of 24, because a lot of colorwork motifs consist of 24, 12, 8, 6, 4 or 3 stitches, and you can divide 24 by any of these numbers and it works. So for me, with this hat, for example, I cast on 96 stitches, because then it has 4 repeats of a 24 stitch repeat. And then I know that anything that I have that I want to put in there that in itself has a number, like a width of any of the numbers I said before, fits in there, and I can just knit in the round without having to fudge any of the stitches. So you can improvise slightly there, because for example, this hat here I cast on with 84 stitches, because I knew I didn't want to knit any especially wide colorwork motifs on there. So this pumpkin has a width of 12 here, so I knew that goes into 84. It's 7. Is it 7? It is 7. And this goes down here, had a width of 6, so I knew that that would go in 14 times, because 14 times 6 has a width of 6. Did I say 6 or 7? It has a width of 6, because 14 times 6 is 84. Yes, it is. So my maths teacher would be proud of me, I hope. Some of them gave up hope quite early on. So yeah, you know that, and you know you can fill it like that. So that is basically the whole principle of it. So now it's down to you, because you have to know your gauge and you have to know which yarn you want to use and how many stitches you should cast on. And that is the part that I cannot help you with that much, because I have a super loose gauge, and what works for me might not work for you. In fact, I did use a book that recommended how many stitches to cast on for a hat after I finished these ones, and it said that the size I had cast on was the size for a toddler. But this fits me and it doesn't look specifically airy or anything, so I'm happy with it. But I am the last person you should ask for how many stitches you should cast on. I would say find a hat pattern that you've made before that worked well and that fits well. Look at how many stitches it has on the bottom of it, and then just kind of adapt these stitches slightly. You should not go plus minus 20 stitches, because then you're going to struggle to fit the hat over your head, or it might be much too loose. But you can usually fudge it a little tiny bit by going plus minus 4, 5, 6, potentially 7, 8 stitches. So just find your favorite hat pattern that fits the yarn weight you want to use. So if you're wanting to use a fingering weight yarn, then just find a knitting pattern that uses fingering weight yarn for a hat that ideally you've made before. If you want to use worsted, then you find one for worsted, etc., etc. And then see how close the number of stitches that are cast on is to a multiple of 24. And if it's relatively close, then you can usually just adjust a tiny bit and cast on a few more stitches or a few less, and it will just work fine, and you will have a hat that fits you and that works really well as a canvas for color work. Of course, if you have planned it all completely through and you know you're not going to knit anything that's 24 stitches wide, but your widest repeat is like 12, then you can also cast on multiples of 12. But I like to just start and give myself the option to change my mind. So for me, a multiple of 24 works really, really well. And that's basically the maths of it. I hope that was clear, but if you have any questions, then just comment below and I will like try to answer it like to the best of my knowledge. And yeah, I'm checking comments quite regularly, so I'm here if you need help. I knew I wanted these motifs, so I started at the bottom with just a simple 2x2 rib, and then I did some like basics. They're from my little basic chart because I find that quite easy to establish a nice like color at the bottom, and then it kind of makes it look more visually interesting, I think. And then I went and started my little ghosts, and you just knit this like any old color work knitting. There's lots of tutorials on how to do this on YouTube as well. Like I learned how to knit color work on YouTube completely, and there's some really good stuff out. I will see if I find something that helped me learning it, so I'll put that below for you as well. But essentially you just kind of have to think about your yarn as crayons, and you just use whatever crayon, this little square that's coming up next to this. So you just knit in the round, you knit your little ghost, blah blah blah, go up, little pumpkins, done. And then I just did a regular crown decrease for the hat and made a little pom-pom to go on top. And that is this one here. So you see, basically it is really not that hard. You just really need to think about your hat as a blank canvas, and you have to plan a little bit ahead on how to fill it. And yeah, if you want to make things easy for you with the mathematics, just go for motifs that are like 3 stitches, 4 stitches, 6 stitches, or 12 stitches, or 24 stitches, and then cast on a repeat of 24 for your hat. Of course, if you're making like a fingering weight hat, you need to cast on more stitches, and if you, like me, want to make a more chunky hat, you need to cast on less. Then I was not done, because I'm also made this little headband featuring little poisonous, it's poisonous, right? If you eat it and it doesn't bite you, it's poisonous, and if it bites you then it's venomous, right? I think. Well, anyway, I made these little like toxic mushrooms on a little headband, and for that I did cast a repeat of 24 stitches on. I cast on 96 stitches for this, so that's 4 times 24, and there's a whole lot of mushrooms going around. And I started this with some ribbing, then we had the mushrooms, and then I finished it with some ribbing, and that's that. It was super quick. This took me like, I don't know, an afternoon I think to do, and I'm really happy with how it came out as well, so that is great. And then to top it all off, yes, the little mushrooms here are from a drops pattern that I will also link below. And to top it all off, I made this hat with little cats, and then duplicate stitched over 2 of them, because this is a black cat head, and then this one are my 2 cats, Pippin and Gandalf. So I think like this you'll be able to see, hopefully. So we have little Gandalf here, and he's grey, and then little Pippin next to him with his little black and white tuxedo cat charms. And this would have been a 3-color colorwork motif, but I'm too lazy to carry around a 3rd strand. So what I did, the 3rd color would have been for the eyes, is I just used beads. Let me hold it up to you. And the way you do that is just by using a crochet hook, and then you put the bead, you know what, I actually have all of this stuff, let me just get it and I'll show it to you, then it's easier to understand. So yeah, here I have some drops yarn that's left over and some contrasting beads. So these are size 6 beads, so they're quite big, and I have a 0.6 millimeter crochet hook. So this is a super fine crochet hook. You really need a really small crochet hook for these. And then what you do is basically you have your stitch on the left needle, so you haven't knitted yet, so basically the bead is going on the round below where you're currently knitting. Then you lift the stitch off the needle with your crochet hook and you just slide over the bead, and then the bead is on that stitch, and you can really nicely use that to get around carrying a third color in color work. If the third color would only be used for accents like eyes, noses, little bows, maybe little stars, something like that. It makes it heaps easier for me because I have done 3-color color work before, but I find it hard to keep the tension nice, because yeah, if you mess up the tension in color work, this finished item won't fit you at all, and it might not even be able to like go over your head, and then you've wasted so much time making something. In fact, I do have like a head that I made, and it was my first color work project, and it doesn't fit me at all. Let me get it out and show you what I mean with that. Here we are. This was an absolute tragedy. It was actually my first color work project. I didn't know that 3-color color work was more difficult, and it just doesn't have stretch at all. Basically, it's super tense, and it's a look. It's a look. I should just like reach out to my friends who have kids and ask them if one of them wants to have this, because it would probably a great hat for a toddler, maybe. Like, I don't know, my head is really big. I have a huge head, but like seriously, it was tragic. So yeah, that's why I try and avoid 3-color color work, and that's why I use beads. I think I could actually do it now if I wanted to, because I know way more about keeping the tension nice, but it's a risk. It's a risk I'm not willing to take at the moment. So yeah, there we go. Anyway, where was I? So I think earlier I was going to tell you how I find my color work motifs and charts, and I kind of started, but then I went off on a little tangent about mathematics. Does that sound remotely right to you? Well, let me just go more into depth, and if you say that you do not need to know, then you can just skip this. I have timestamps below as usual. But yes, if you're looking for color work knitting charts, of course Ravelry is your first address. And to find them, I usually go into the patterns page, and then you can select free if you do not want to pay for charts, which is completely fair. And then you can select a menu button that says color work, and then you can like select Fair Isle, Stranded, further options. So that's what I do. And I should come up with lots of patterns that are free and are color work. And I usually look through the Hot Right Now, because often it has kind of seasonally appropriate patterns in it. So there's often quite a few like pumpkins, bats, whatever right now, because people are making them, so they're up on the top of the list. But you can also sort by most favorites, which in my case yielded a lot of Star Wars charts actually, which is quite cool in itself. So if you're into that, then off you go. And you can also like filter by most projects, whatever, published in which year, so that's always good. And what I also like to do sometimes is I filter by like colors used, and then you can select how many colors you want to be in it. So then as a little lazy Susan, I would just select 2 in this case. There's also the option to search specifically for color work charts that are not finished project patterns. I think you go through like 2 elements, and then you can select charts, and then it just spits out this massive amount of like colorwork knitting charts that you can plug into anything really. I think the top of the list at the moment is a really cute pattern with hearts that can go on socks and stuff like that. So really do have a look. It's so creative. It's so kind that people have just been uploading these free patterns. like for example the Halloween Fair Isle scarf that I used for this here, or the pumpkin patch beanie that I used for the pumpkins, or the little mushrooms that I adapted a little bit from a drops pattern. So yeah, there's a massive amount of free resources if you're on a budget. If you want to get charts that are really sophisticated, and like there's some of them in the free section as well, but there are some knitting pattern designers that are known for making incredibly beautiful colorwork charts that are paid for patterns, and sometimes it can just be worth getting that as well. Then Ravelry. Something else that I use is a website called Braceletbook that has patterns for friendship bracelets on it. So that's where these cats came from. I'm also going to link to that pattern below. And the Braceletbook page is just, I don't know, like in the friendship bracelet scene, there's this incredible community that just provides free patterns for so many different like friendship bracelet patterns. And they're on there, they have pictures, they are very clear, very easy to like, it's basically like pixel art almost. So when you go onto the Braceletbook page, you can also filter by how many strands you want to use for this pattern and how many colors. And usually the amount of strands kind of more or less is equal to the width of the colorwork motif. So I usually select up to 12 strands, and then I select up to 3 colors, because I found that a lot of friendship bracelets have this thing that I said for the cats where it has like a third color as an accent, but it's not the main focus. So then I know I can use beads. And something to keep in mind for using friendship bracelet patterns is that if we look at our knit stitches, they're not square, they're actually a little bit squashed looking. You can kind of see that when I hold up my pattern here next to the actual ghosts, the pattern looks a little bit slimmer and the ghosts on the beanie look a tiny bit chunkier. So whatever you make will probably end up looking a tiny bit squashed, but there are, like, if you think about it a little bit pragmatically, realistically, there's just lots of motifs where it just doesn't matter. Like my little chunky cats, that's exactly how I wanted them to be, so I'm really happy with that. And I found there's so much stuff there. There were just like 10 pages of stuff for just Halloween, for just 3 colors or less to sort through. There were like bats, skulls, potions, like everything your heart could desire. And yeah, it's just a really valuable resource to use as well. And then there are like more resources you can use for colorwork charts, but it gets a tiny bit iffy sometimes, because for example, if you look at Pinterest, you find quite a lot of colorwork charts on there, but I actually found that a lot of the time when there is knitting patterns on Pinterest, it's that someone kind of uploaded them and stole from the designer, because like I found patterns that I bought and paid for and made on Pinterest, and that's obviously really not cool, especially if it's like, it's not cool in any circumstance, but especially if you look at like smaller designers and it's their whole livelihood, then yeah, it's just really not nice to do that. So I would say if you do use Pinterest, then make sure that the pattern that you're using from there hasn't been ripped off something else. So that about Pinterest, but I do find Pinterest quite useful for actual finding links to Ravelry, because I find like the Ravelry search function for keywords can sometimes be a little bit unhelpful, and if you look like for knitting pattern Fair Isle or something like that, it comes up with really nice stuff that then has links to Ravelry, and then you can buy the stuff directly from the designer, which is of course completely fine. Am I missing something? Give me a second to think. Yes, of course. So this is also a little bit of a gray area, but I did want to talk about it. So a lot of the time you can actually also use pixel art for for making knitting charts, because essentially, if you think about it, a knit stitch is, if you're doing color work, not much different from a pixel. You again have the issue that it can sometimes be a little bit squashed, it can sometimes not really fit the dimensions, but apart from that, it's definitely possible to use black and white pixel art for making knitting charts and making color work charts and making that work. I do not know about the legalities of it. I cannot advise you there. I think like I would always want to give credit to the designer of the original pattern, at least that. I'm not offering any knit items for sale, so everything I make is for my personal use. So I think that's mostly fine, but still, like, it might be a little bit of a gray area, but you might find it helpful for me to mention that to you. So there's that. This is all of the free stuff. And I made these hats from stash yarn, these headbands, and I spent like in total maybe €3 on yarn for this or something like that. I spent zero. I spent actually, like, because it was all in stash already, I would have probably spent something like around €3 if I hadn't had these, because this was really cheap drops yarn. This was some Malabrigo leftovers, and this was some Malabrigo leftovers. This here was some Wild Atlantic yarn, silk yarn left over, and so is this. This was left over from a sweater that I made ages ago. It was really indulgent sweater, but yeah, so this didn't cost me anything, and it reduced my yarn stash a little bit. But since we were just talking about giving credit, and I'm quite big on that, I really do want to mention a book and like series of decks for making modular knitting patterns that has really impressed me. I have the book, I do not have any of the decks, and I will get it and I will show it to you and you will see what I mean. So this is a book by Jamie Lomax called the Doodle Knit Directory, and Jamie Lomax has a company called Pacific Knit Co, and she designs modular knitting patterns that basically consist of the blank canvas that we talked about earlier and different kinds of little patterns that you can use to fill this blank canvas with. So you can do all of this for free, basically. Everything I talked to you about, like figuring out how many stitches you need for a hat, having it as a blank canvas and stuff like that. But if you do want to give a small designer a little bit of money and also save yourself a massive amount of time, because finding all of these charts took me forever. Like finding all of these free charts, I poured over it for hours. But she has this book that contains 200 mix and match motifs and patterns, and also she has done the complete maths for you. So if you're knitting in a DK or sport or light worsted weight yarn, then she actually has like a lot of, like, the first half of the book is colorwork motifs. I'm trying to show some to you without giving away the pattern, because that wouldn't be cool. Let me just hold it like this. So you see, like, for example, like it's sorted by seasons. This is autumn. There is so many leaves in here, and you can just pick whatever you like best and plug it into a hat pattern, and it's going to be very beautiful because they've been tested. They're tried, tested and true. But the second half of the book is basically pattern recipes. So it's the stitch counts you would need for varying sizes in like yarn that's around DK weight to make hats and headbands and mittens, and what else is in there? Socks, cowls, always nice, infinity cowl, scarf. I'm just reading that to you. Hat. Then we said headbands, we said mittens, fingerless mittens, and fingering weight socks. So if you do want to save yourself some time, or if you have zero idea about how many stitches to cast on for a hat, then this here cost me, I think, €16, and it's on the back listed at £16.99 for UK and $24 US. So really good investment if you do want to make things easier for yourself. And also she, like, the idea to put colorwork motifs on a note card and then to just combine them however I feel like is completely from her, because she does these doodle decks where essentially you get a deck of playing cards that are structured similarly to a note card, and on these playing cards you have all of these different colorwork motifs that you can combine and kind of plug together in whatever way you think makes a beautiful finished product. Basically, think about colorwork charts the way you would think about little Lego bricks, and you just combine them however you want to make something that you love. So that's basically it from my side. This was a little Halloween episode. I hope you liked it. It's a little bit different from what I usually do, but I should do a like regular podcast episode soon because we haven't had one in a while, and I would be excited about that. And yeah, these are my little 3 headwear items that I made for this Halloween. I am keeping this because this is just so perfectly Halloweeny cute, that I'm going to wear this basically every day of the next week. And it's still quite warm in Germany. It's like at some days it's almost 20 degrees, but this shall not stop me. I will run around with a mildly sweaty hat and wear my pom-pom hat in the middle of what is a way too warm autumn. But yes, and then we have the little cat hat, which I'm also keeping because these are my cats. Like, these are my cats on it. I cannot give it away. Yes, little Pippin. Here's little Gandalf. He even looks a tiny bit grouchy because he is a little gremlin. And then next to them there are so many black cats, which remind me of my neighbor's cat, who is still alive, but she's like my childhood cat almost, because she was constantly coming around hanging out with me. Her name's Mimi. She's now older than 20. She's a really old grouchy lady. She screams when you talk to her, but I love her. So she's on there too, multiple times actually. A little tiny black cat, and the slightly bigger Pippin and Gandalf, because I duplicate stitched them, so now they're a bit more voluminous, and that is accurate because they're chonkers, because they're like 5.5 kilograms each. They're huge. Half British short hair for the win, I guess. And then I have the little poisonous headband with the mushrooms, and I'm not keeping that. I'm sending this to a friend who is obsessed with mushroom hunting, and I don't think she's watching this, but if she is, then hi. That was a little surprise. It's now probably not a surprise, but who knows, by the time this episode goes up you might already have this, and that should spur me on to just send out this headband a little bit faster, because I'm notoriously slow with my mail, even though I like sending snail mail. Alright, that's it from me today, and if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I really like seeing you here. It's really close to 800 subscribers, which is crazy, but I'm so happy that you're here and that you're on this little knitting journey with me, and I'll see you very soon. Bye bye!